Say hi, Cece. Say hi, Bells.
Hi, Bill.
No, you gotta say hi.
Hi.
When Chris and I got married, we moved out here after visiting, fell in love with the area. It's gorgeous in Colorado.
How is it possible that a woman and two kids are just completely gone off the face of the earth?
A family disappears and attention shifts to one man.
This guy right here, he's gonna do all the dishes.
That's me.
I get the phone so I can get pictures. Oh, please. My husband's a genius.
Behind the idyllic family facade, a darker reality simmered within the Watts household. When two people are obsessed with control and their own image, how can they possibly stay in a relationship together? Someone has to surrender, or someone has to go, right? Ironically, public opinion paints both Chris and Shanann as narcissists, but two narcissists can rarely coexist in the same room, let alone be married. So how did these two do the impossible? It's simple. Chris Watts is not a narcissist. Welcome to Timeless Mysteries. Please like and subscribe. In most scenarios, the narcissist holds the power while the victim struggles to live up to their unrealistic expectations. But Chris wasn't a victim, nor was he the passive controlled man Shanann believed him to be.
What the heck? I'll never meet him. He's just a Facebook friend. I have a million of them. Nothing's gonna come of it. Well, 2 weeks later, we finally meet on a blind date and ended up falling in love with him.
Here's the secret Chris Watts doesn't want anyone to know. He wanted Shanann to believe she was in control. Every time her decisions aligned with his desires, he skillfully fed into her narcissism, reinforcing her belief that she was in control. He played the role of the compliant, defeated husband, faking submission like a predator pretending to be wounded, only to watch and wait while maintaining control all along. Today, we explore the inner dynamics of a severely toxic relationship that resulted in the death of a pregnant woman and her two young daughters. First, I'd like to make it clear that being a narcissist doesn't necessarily make you inherently evil. Almost everyone has some degree of narcissism in their personality profile that they try to hide. However, Chris Watts wasn't just a narcissist. He is a dark empath. Think about that for a second. What comes to mind? Dark empathy. I know everyone has met one or two people who are deeply empathetic. These are the people we turn to when we need to talk about our problems. It's almost magical how they can absorb our problems, making them disappear as if they never existed in the first place. Chris understood that the key to his power was letting Shanann believe she was the one in charge.
So I am a hot mess, so disregard. I'm gonna go live when Chris gets here because he'll kill me if I tried these without him. But hold on, mommy. Look. 2 cinnamon rolls and 2 cake.
Chris has something all narcissists don't. He has high emotional intelligence. His mastery of emotional manipulation wasn't accidental. It's a skill that he honed throughout childhood, growing up with a narcissistic mother.
I didn't like the way she treated him. I just got a bad feeling. Christopher always seemed anxious. I didn't believe they were missing. I believed that she was going to punish Chris. That relationship was toxic. He's not the sociopath next door. He's not the psychopath.
His mother likely never realized she was being manipulated by her own child. As an adult, marrying Shanann was a calculated choice to continue the dynamic of passive manipulation that he'd already mastered. As Chris transitioned from pretending to be under his mother's control to pretending to be under the control of his wife's. So what is a dark empath? While the idea of someone understanding and manipulating emotions isn't a new concept in psychology, the term dark empathy is. This term offers a more precise label than older terms like psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. Unlike those, dark empathy highlights the ability to mirror and exploit emotions with chilling effectiveness. This is a framework that fits Chris Watts far better than the alternatives. Chris Watts didn't act impulsively, nor did he seek validation in the typical ways of a narcissist. Psychologists might challenge the label of dark empath, preferring more established diagnoses like antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. However, psychopaths typically don't understand or feel emotions on a deep level. They manipulate through cold, calculated behaviors without emotional awareness. Those with antisocial personality disorder, while possibly they understand emotions to some extent, they tend to be more overt, aggressive, and forceful in their control. What sets Chris apart is his ability to deeply understand and mirror emotions, all while remaining emotionally detached. This made him particularly dangerous, allowing him to manipulate those around him with subtle emotional control, a hallmark of dark empathy. Given the definitions of psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder, dark empathy provides a more accurate understanding of Chris Watts' manipulative tendencies. Psychologists might also argue that Chris's behavior before the murders, including the way he handled his relationship with both his wife and his mistress, could be aligned with the traits of narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissists often seek validation and admiration, but can become cold and calculating when their needs are threatened. In Chris's case, his actions leaving his mother, replacing Shanann with Nicole, suggest that he wasn't driven by emotional connections, but by a need to remove obstacles standing in the way of his desires. These women were sources of control or validation. When they no longer served his interest, Chris discarded them with a detached precision. While this fits patterns seen with narcissistic personality disorder, Chris wasn't emotionally invested in anyone at all.
Put that blanket over her too and did the same thing.
Same blanket, same way?
She said, "No, Daddy." That's the next thing she said.
I think the hardest part knowing our granddaughter watched her sister die.
It's worse than we even thought.
You had a real strong connection as a grandmother.
Thank you, Nana, Papa.
He manipulated their emotions while remaining emotionally detached, using them as tools to quietly assert power and clear his path. Take, for example, Chris's interaction with his father, Ronnie Watts, during the interrogation. As he confessed to the murders, Chris visibly made himself smaller, shrinking into his seat and whispering, "I killed her."
From what we've been told, he strangled her to death and began wrapping her up in a sheet.
Did Bella walk in while he was wrapping her?
Bella asked, "What are you doing with Mommy?"
Despite the gravity of his confession, he managed to secure sympathy and support from a man who had just lost his grandchildren to his own son's violence.
Something with it, whatever, and he ran with it and said, yeah, she was
But they had to come up with
choking
something.
the kids and blah, blah, blah.
Well, he at least got him to confess
Yes.
that something had happened. At least it sped things along.
I'm glad this is going to shut up all the people that are still saying that Shannon did it.
This wasn't a coincidence. It speaks to Chris's deeply ingrained ability to present himself as a victim even after committing an unthinkable act. His body language and soft-spoken confession were carefully calculated to elicit pity rather than outrage. This manipulation transcends typical forms of narcissism and deceit, revealing a far more insidious and terrifying mastery of emotional control.
I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here.
Then I also want you to look at his physical distancing. He's in closed body position and he's rocking back and forth in a self-soothing sort of way.
I just want them back. I just want them to come back.
Making Chris Watts a much greater threat than anyone could have ever imagined. Chris Watts' emotional detachment and manipulation didn't begin after the murders. It had been shaping his relationships for years, particularly the toxic dynamic between his wife Shanann and his mother Cindy Watts. On the surface, it appeared that Shanann and Cindy never got along, with Cindy often kept at arm's length from the family. But this conflict wasn't just a natural clash of personalities. Chris was the one pulling the strings all along. He quietly manipulated the situation, framing Shanann as the problem, which allowed him to remove his mother as an obstacle in his life, leaving Cindy to believe Shanann was keeping Chris away from her. It was Chris subtly ensuring that his mother stayed out of the picture. Now, with Shanann gone, Cindy pounced on the opportunity to fill that void, just as Chris anticipated. Cindy refused to believe his son was guilty of the horrific acts, instead blaming Shanann for pushing him to the edge. A psychologist might describe Cindy's reaction as textbook narcissism, a desperate attempt to maintain control over her family's narrative, but in reality, Cindy was behaving exactly how Chris wanted her to. By stoking her rage and directing her anger at Shanann, Chris kept her blind to the truth, manipulating her into defending him even as the evidence mounted. Cindy is completely unaware of the control her son has over her. Cindy is just another pawn in Chris's twisted game of emotional manipulation. Psychologists might question whether Chris was fully aware of his manipulations or if they were subconscious behaviors shaped by his upbringing. Was he intentionally controlling those around him, or were his actions automatic responses from years of managing the emotions of a narcissist like his mother? Either way, Chris spent his entire life trying to escape control. Each time he believed he had broken free, he found himself trapped in another emotional prison. Ironically, Chris has now truly escaped that cycle, but he's confined to a physical prison. Chris constantly seeking freedom, only to be drawn back into the same dynamic, building new cages with every escape. Critics might argue that labeling Chris as a dark empath is speculative at best without a formal evaluation, and there's no psychological consensus on whether the term dark empath is a symptom or a diagnosis. While some psychologists might propose that Chris's actions stemmed from less malevolent manipulation and more from a deeply ingrained survival mechanism, rather than being a master manipulator from the start, he may have been adapting to the controlling forces in his life, first his mother, then Shanann, and eventually Nicole. Over time, this adaptation twisted into something far more destructive, with Chris turning to physical violence to avoid conflict and assert his control, never fully grasping the true consequences of his actions. But this story doesn't end here. His eerie detachment and relentless need for control suggest that his capacity for violence didn't stop with killing his family. In our next chapter, we'll explore the chilling evidence that points to one terrifying conclusion. If Chris Watts hadn't been caught, he almost certainly would have killed again.
Knowing what you now know, what would you say to Chris Watts?
And we'll take an even closer look at the horrifying similarities between Chris Watts and another infamous killer. You won't want to miss this epic discussion into the minds of these dark empaths. How many lives would he have taken? As always, stay kind, be vigilant, and always seek the truth. I'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, Robert here from Timeless Mysteries. I want to start by thanking all of my new subscribers. I'm really excited to have you here, and your support means a lot to me. And I do just want to take a minute here to give a shout out to one of my members, Len Purcell. Thank you.